Hello everyone, Richard Lewis here, and as you can see from my surroundings, I am back. I'm back home. You'll also be able to see from the light that's emerging just outside. It's pretty early in the morning while I record this. Been out in the States. I'm a little bit jet lagged and fucked up. And unfortunately, I was on a plane while it was a great piece of drama that I wanted to comment about. And I think I might have missed the boat a little, but I'm going to make a fucking video anyway because why not? I can't sleep. So what I wanted to talk about was Jatt's unfortunate drama, which it's one of the most ridiculous things I've seen probably this year in esports. Now, just for those that missed it, or maybe you're from another game and you're not so interested, basically Jatt is a commentator and I suppose analyst as well, is fair to say, for League of Legends. He works directly for Riot. He used to be a player who has now transitioned into this role, and obviously it's coming up to the World Championships in League, so he's doing his job in sort of making people interested in the upcoming competition by tweeting some observations, by putting some observations out on social media, which is, par for the course. Now, this tweet that he made was that he said, if you look at Huni, who is the Fnatic top laner, he has 375 league points in Masters, the highest ranking in 115 games of solo queue in South Korea, which is where all of the teams are currently boot camping because they believe it's the optimal environment to play in. Now, Balls, who is the top laner for Cloud9, is in Diamond 2. He's only got 84 league points, and he's done that in 192 games. Jatt adds that there's more to life than solo queue, but this is a worrying trend for Cloud9. Now, just to pick up on a couple of observations right from the start, I guess we'll get the unprofessional thing out of the way. You probably won't like this, and I imagine some of you will turn the video off at this point, but something you need to know about Jatt is he's a huge bitch when it comes to social media. If you need any anecdotal evidence about this, let's look at how he got super upset about people talking about the Jatt dilemma, which is a joke that Thorin made about him, sort of criticizing his analytical skills, if you will. He effectively brigaded a thread, actual vote brigading, by putting a twit longer out about it, saying, I just wish the Jatt dilemma thing would die. Well, welcome to the real world where you don't get to choose how people talk about you. Speaking of someone who's had some of the most fucking heinous lies said about him over a 10-year career in esports, the things I get accused of, I can't sympathize with you crying over someone making a little bit of fun at some of the ridiculous things you've said, because on a long enough time scale, all analysts are going to be wrong, all analysts are going to say stupid things, all analysts are going to go with an internal feeling that then transpires not to be true. And Jatt's just all the time with his twit long, I just fuck off, honestly. But in this instance, he's absolutely on the money and has every right to feel aggrieved with the way this panned out. So the other thing I want to just observe here is that is perhaps as mild a criticism as you can issue. Balls has been criticized for his performances in Cloud9 pretty much consistently throughout this year. There's always been question marks about him. Is he limited in his champion pool? Is he too reliant on Rumble? Is he technically good enough to play in the current meta? Is he a mechanically solid player? If Cloud9 replaced him, would that be the end of all of their problems? And on it goes. This should be absolutely nothing. I mean, this is barely a footnote compared to the reams and reams of criticism and speculation Balls will already have had to go through. Now, for some reason, it just seems to have kicked everyone in the metaphorical balls, and everyone's got upset about it. And I have no idea why. I can only speculate that maybe the professionals are taking this a little bit to heart, because they're in this hugely stressful situation of Worlds is coming, we're boot camping in Korea, we've already got our own doubts, the group draws happen, there's all sorts of question marks about that. But anyway, so it starts with Sneaky, Balls' teammate, and he's like, "Why are you picking on Balls?" Tweets at Jatt, "Why are you picking on Balls?" I mean, the idea that by pointing out some inarguable facts about where one player is and where another player is in terms of ability, and of course these two teams will square off against each other in the group stages. It seems ridiculous to even try and diminish it to picking on. Picking on implies, if Jatt was every day like, this player, Balls is terrible. Balls needs to be removed from Cloud9. Imagine a Cloud9 without Balls. Balls, balls, balls. You know what I mean? If it was everyday Balls, right, then fair enough. That would be picking on. Picking on is a sustained attack against somebody for emotive reasons. It's not about reasoning or rationale. You do it on an emotive basis. When you pick on a kid at school, four eyes, you might have glasses yourself, right? But it's never rational, and it's sustained. It's designed to upset the person. So to call it picking on is really childish. And again, I got no issue with Sneak. He's always struck me as a good guy, and everyone knows I've got a lot of respect for Cloud9. That's been said multiple times, but that's a ridiculous viewpoint. And then he said, "I'm pretty sure there's more than just him in Diamond 2. Bjergsen, Turtle, Aframu, and Xmithy." And they're like, okay, that's all well and good. But it seems to me that what you're doing there is, it's like, hey, look, here's some other names that are in Diamond 2. Well, okay, perhaps Jatt will want to make some observations about those people as well. And if he does want to make some statistical observations, then what are we going to say? Are we going to say, oh, well, you can't do that to them? I mean, you've just effectively lined these guys up and said, well, let's look at these performances. I mean, all of those people have been subject to criticism at various points in their career, predicated not just on solo queue performance, but performances in games. It's not that those people are getting a pass at all. They're actually as much in the firing line as anyone else. So Jatt replied to this by saying, I'm not trying to pick on anyone. I currently feel like he's an outlier, and he's identified someone that's absolutely right. He's the one that has the question marks about him, and has done all this season. He says Balls has 80 plus more games than anyone else in Diamond 2. It's not personal. I hope to see Cloud9 do well at Worlds. I mean, again, this is interesting because one point that everyone's missed here is when he's replied to this. So first of all, let's just talk about the mathematics. Obviously, 80 more games. We always talk about how solo queue works. That on enough games averaged out, you'll always be at the level that you're at. Now, given that you've played all these extra games more than anyone else, it suggests that you are blocked. You're having a problem climbing out of Diamond 2. Now, sure, he could be super unlucky with the people he's getting paired up with, but that excuse has never worked for anyone else ever in the history of League of Legends. In fact, you get laughed if you say something like that. So we have to assume that actually he's struggling at this level. That if everyone else was given those 80-plus games, it would require somebody struggling as much as him to say, well, okay, that person now is probably worthy of the same level of attention. But anyway, back to this. This is the point I really wanted to make here about this tweet. I hope to see Cloud9 do well at Worlds. Well, how interesting that players are attacking Jatt for bias and saying you're picking on this player, and yet no one would attack a analyst or commentator who's, by definition, supposed to be as impartial as possible. In the sense that your hopes of the teams and who does well and how you feel about them, you should probably try and not talk about that quite so much. It could be perceived to be unprofessional, it could be perceived to be biased, it could be perceived to inform your commentating. But no one picks up on that point. Apparently that's okay. And usually if Jatt's been chewed up for North American bias and TSM bias in the past. So saying I hope to see Cloud9 do well, that's just flown under everyone's radar. He also adds, again, a very good point, saying Bjergsen, Turtle, Aframu, and Xmithy have not demoted from Diamond 1 to Diamond 2 on multiple occasions, and obviously Balls has. Now, other pros start wading in at this point, and again, a lot of respect for some of the guys that are talking. So first of all, Soaz, the absolute legend. And I don't think this really is anything that you can grumble about either. I thought Soaz probably has made the most balanced response out of all the pros that got involved. He said, how does this even matter? Darian and Genji never played solo queue in their life. Solo queue is completely different than competitive. Yes, okay, fine. I would agree with that. I would say you can get people who are incredible at solo queue that would never fit in a team, and I imagine it's vice versa. Then St. Vicious came in and said, Jatt, I'm going to draw the line here. Questioning someone's solo queue ranking is pretty stupid. And you're like, well, okay. So if it's stupid, perhaps people can explain to me why there's a limitation put in place by most teams. Like most teams, when they're saying we want to audition new players, the official rule in LCS policies are you have to be Diamond 5 or above. No one's ever trialing Diamond 5 players in the LCS. No one. So if it doesn't matter, your teams are putting your own limitations in place. And of course, these players make guides and all their little YouTube channel, and when they're on streams and people come up to them and they say, well, how do I improve? How do I climb? They all say the same thing. Play, focus on your own game, get good, and you'll climb. Everybody endorses the efficacy, the validity of the solo queue system. Everybody endorses that. Everybody. It's Riot's whole system. So why are we now trying to say, oh, well, solo queue doesn't matter all of a sudden just because one pro who is well liked by all accounts is having a tough time in South Korea? Amazing. He chimes in. Why do you even bring up solo queue rating in order to estimate someone's skill? It just fuels potential shit coming his way. Well, look, that's not Jatt's responsibility to think about how the community is going to react to his information. This is factual information. If the community are going to throw shit at balls and treat him badly, that's a condemnation. You've got to aim at the community. You can't aim it at Jatt for stating the facts. A mature, informed community would be, yes, Balls is perhaps a poor player, and that would just be the end of it. They wouldn't hound him on Twitter and, ha, your shit die, ha. That's something else. That's another problem you're pointing at. You can't, as an analyst or a commentator or a pundit, as I prefer to use, you can't worry about what's going to happen moving forward, like what someone might do with your information. I hear ridiculous arguments like this all the time, like, oh, Richard, if you write about this story as a journalist, what if it affects their career? Well, unfortunately, I can't worry about that. I've got a responsibility to the readers to report what's in the public interest. So, and of course, amazing there, does echo as well. Why do you even bring up solo queue rating in order to estimate someone's skill? Well, let's just point this out. This is Western players that have gone to South Korea specifically to practice. They're playing a lot of solo queue because everybody believes that solo queue environment is a much higher level than Europe, a much higher level than North America. So actually, this is an interesting experiment in a lot of ways, and it should be looked at, and you can probably take something from the statistics that come out of it. And certainly any good analyst will use all the tools that are available at his disposal. It's not like Jatt can embed himself with you guys and interview every team that's having scrims with them and try and find some balance in all the subjectivity and then go, oh, I've heard Balls is playing really well actually in these scrims, but turns out his solo queue ranking's not so good, so who knows what's really going to happen. What sort of analysis would that be? That's fucking terrible. Then Sheep comes in and says Wolf has been master tier like 90% of this season and he has a negative win rate on every support. And, okay, that's another good observation. I mean, it's kind of almost as if you're doing the same thing Jatt's doing there. You're pointing out something of statistical interest while simultaneously trying to shame someone for doing the same thing. Seems ridiculous. So then, I mean, I think I want to just add what MonteCristo says. Now, for me, there can be no argument that there is nobody, in my opinion, certainly there is nobody who hasn't been a player that has the level of insight and analysis in League of Legends as MonteCristo. I think that is a pretty definitive statement we could all agree with. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he is the benchmark for someone who wasn't an ex-pro. And he said on Twitter, I don't think Riot Jatt did anything wrong. He didn't. Accounting for all factors in his discussion of balls. Pros may not like it, but it's his job. And of course, the whole thing, it's their job. It does get brought up quite a lot, and it's not like it's the entirety of your job, but it's a big part of it. You know, if you're responsible for analysis, if you're responsible for punditry and information and trying to put that out there, it is a pretty big part of what you do, and you can't just focus on the positive all the time. It would be ridiculous to do so. And again, look, just use examples from real sports. I can't think of one real sport where a commentator has seen, like, okay, let's use soccer, football as an example. I can't think of a time when a footballer has missed like an open goal, right? And the commentator has gone, well, he's just missed an open goal from 2 yards, but to be fair to him, he's a really good player and would usually put that away 99 times out of 100. And let's not focus on how that could change the game. Oh, look, he's really upset. You can see he's going to cry. No. Take the camera off him. Let's just not talk about it. Game on. And they just play on. It just doesn't happen. Commentator goes, that's abysmal. Wow, will that cost his team the game? Like, they've had no chances all this game, and then he misses a clear-cut chance like that. You've got to bury these at this level. You know, the newspapers the next day, when they're doing their little number ratings, like you get in the Sun or whatever, he's not getting a fucking 7, is he? He's getting a fucking 5. At best, he missed an open goal. You know, and here's the funny part. The pros read that, right? Pro sports people read all that shit. And yet I can't think of a time a pro player has lashed out at a journalist, an analyst, a commentator in a mainstream sport over just making an observation about performance. I think a few have maybe said something about like the gutter press, or like rummaging around in their bins, or taking photos of them like smoking around the back of a nightclub or whatever. But I can't think of one where it's just been performance based, because why the fuck should it be? At the end of the day, if you're not man enough, right? Or that's going to trigger someone, isn't it? I'm a cisgendered shitlord now, right? But what I mean is, if you're not adult enough, if you're not of the requisite level of mental fortitude to be able to cope with someone criticising your performance, perhaps being a competitor isn't for you. Perhaps it's not for you. If it's something that you genuinely can't cope with, I don't think it's for you. Because it's always going to happen. There's no way you're ever going to change the culture. No matter how much Riot bangs on about toxicity, you're never going to change the culture. So a fan or a pundit or someone who cares about a sport is going to watch a sport and be like, he's not playing very well, but I won't talk about this. In fact, I will barely register that fact at all. It's never going to be that way. So that's something to think about. Anyway, MonteCristo continues. In my opinion, Ball's professional play has been subpar this year, and it's worth at least considering his solo queue performance. So again, where's the outrage aimed at MonteCristo? That's a far harsher piece of criticism, by the way, to say that his play has been subpar this year. And he's right. he's absolutely right. And it certainly is worth at least considering his solo queue performance. I haven't seen any outrage aimed at him. I don't think I saw any pros digging into MonteCristo so far. Pros will never like it, he continues, when analysts discuss flaws in their play. Fact is, however, not everyone can be the best, and this is exactly right. What are we trying to do when we do analysis? Now, every time I get called an analyst, everyone goes, Richard, you're not even in global elite on CSGO, and you can't do it, and you've never been in the top team. So, right. They're all ridiculous arguments. We've all heard them a bunch of times. Here's what analysis is. Analysis is where you try and take relevant and pertinent information about a specific game, a specific matchup, a specific situation ultimately, and you try and break it down into small parts. So we look at one facet of this particular thing, and you try and inform, enlighten, educate, entertain the general public that are interested in this particular situation, matchup, whatever you want to call it. That's what you do. That's what you have to do. I think what Jatt did there in that tweet was a bang-up job of textbook analysis. And equally what you do when you do this is you create an understanding in the listener, in the viewer, about hierarchy. And it's hugely important in terms of sports to understand the performance pyramid of hierarchy. There is no value in blurring the lines to say that we can call someone the best player at something, and we can say that this player is perhaps the best all-rounder, but actually what we can't do is get into the minutiae and talk about what they're bad at, what their weaknesses are, why this person is bad, why is this statistical outlier, blah, blah, blah. If we can't do that, we cannot really create any sort of clear understanding about performance hierarchy. And people want to know this. This is a classic thing in sports. It's the reason why sports produce so many lists. It's the reason why sports fans argue in bars. Think about the NFL. Who's the greatest quarterback? How many? Even with all the statistics in American football, people will still have the debate about the greatest of all time. Even the statistics don't tell the full story. There's historical context to take in. There's financial context to take in. There's how competitive the game was. There's science to take into it. Right? There's all these things. And it's the job as when you're an analyst to make sure that the people out there understand it as much as possible, so they're informed, so they can appreciate the game on a level that they previously couldn't. And then Monty ends with a point that I think is really on the money. I think pros should spend less time arguing with analysts on Twitter and just prove to us they're good at Worlds. Now this gets said all the time, by the way. Whenever one of these little fucking weird, little fractious outbreaks of arguments crop up, this always gets said. And no, I've never seen any pro just endorse that view, by the way. But this is it, right? For me, as somebody that's analysed teams in the past, and somebody that's said things about individual levels of performance or team new lineups, and I've said, okay, like here's a good example. I don't mind pointing out when I get it wrong. Now, we all know that in Counter-Strike, for example, the German scene wasn't the strongest. It used to be in CSS. It had an incredible, really good league, the German EPS. Everyone was salaried. There was all businesses associated with it. It was really good, really professional. It was seen as almost like the promised land for a lot of people. Like, British players used to go and play out there back when British players were good. And obviously it all went to shit in CSGO, and they've really struggled. Now, when Mouse Sports first put together this lineup, which they did, which was an amalgamation of Godby, who had been a legendary 1.6 in-game leader, some of the Penta roster, and obviously some players that they already had in their roster, I wasn't that impressed with it at all. Like, I just looked at it on paper and I said, I don't really see that's going to do anything. And I was doing a Gfinity event, and on the first day, live, we had to give, the analysts were there in the chair, it's me, it's Doran, we had to give our general thoughts. And I was like, okay, well, for me, Mouse Sports are one of the weakest teams here. Arguably the weakest. I don't think they're going to do anything. I think, this is a LAN environment, first major tournament together. None of these players have done anything historically to even make you, with the exception of Godby, that would make you think they were going to do really well. Anyway, they had this fucking breakout event, didn't they? They had this breakout event where they were unbelievably good, and they beat top teams. And I'm sat there with egg on my face. But here's the thing: all the evidence that I'd accumulated and interpreted in my brain led me to arrive at a conclusion that seemed completely understandable to me, and obviously understandable to lots of other people that heard me make that point. Now, they proved me wrong. It's actually great when you're an analyst to be proven wrong, because it challenges your preconceptions. It makes you look at things harder. It makes you dig into things. It can sometimes just be a nice surprise. So I took a lot of positives from that. And get this, nobody on Mouse Sports cussed me out about it. In fact, when I went up to them and I congratulated them on doing well and proving me really wrong, they were like, well, you're entitled to your opinion, and maybe it was a little bit of motivation for us to prove you wrong. But thanks for being adult enough and coming over and shaking our hands and admitting you were wrong. And we're all firm, we're all good pals. Like, there's no hard feelings. You're never going to see Mouse Sports on Twitter attacking me for saying they've put in a bad performance. They certainly didn't when I was literally completely wrong about them at one event. So why can't pros just do that in League of Legends? I got to say, it's a bit ridiculous. Anyway, if you think that's the end of it, I'd love to say you were right, but you're not. So for some reason, and this is just another example of the Riot system, and how everyone's got to be a family, and how it's not really a competitive sport, and there's no real boundaries between the people that own the league, the people that work for them, commentating and promoting the league, the teams, it's all one big kind of clique, if you like. So Jatt comes out and apologises on a twit longer. And he says, calling out balls for his solo queue performance was in bad form. I think there is value in data, but a single data point doesn't paint an accurate or fair picture. Well, it does within the context of how you framed it. You know, it wasn't in bad form, right? For starters, it's not bad form at all. It's what you're supposed to be doing, and how pathetic it is of you to now take it back. And I guess probably what's happened is someone behind the scenes has said, "Oh, come on, you know, like Cloud9 is Cloud9, and you know, it's just and NA and come on, we're all trying to be friends with each other, and right." So it's either that conversation's happened, or someone's gone, "Hey, Jatt, yeah, you know, you're a massive bitch on fucking social media. Anytime anyone says anything bad about you, yeah, a bit hypocritical, isn't it, to stand by your point?" So maybe he's come out and apologised on that basis. But regardless, the apology is ridiculous. It's absurd. It makes no sense, and it completely contradicts everything that he said. And the apology's wrong. And then like I say, the part about the single data point doesn't paint an accurate or fair picture. It does if you contextualize it by saying all we're looking at is this single point of data as a comparison. And he didn't even say like, oh, this is an absolute measurement of who's better. He just said, This is a concern. If it's not a concern for Cloud9, I don't know why they've reacted the way they did. Then he goes on, I've reached out to Cloud9 and apologised, and I wish them the best as they prepare for Worlds. So it's like, again, just that shouldn't be happening. Just where are the real analysts at? Where are the real fucking sports pundits at? You just fucking, look, prove me wrong, fuck off. That's it. That's the end of that conversation, right? So I mean, some of the things sort of came up out of it, which are just worth throwing in. Dexter, again, you know, I like Marcel a lot. He said presenting the data itself was fine, just the phrasing you used seemed to be completely off. I don't know how he could have phrased it any better, but whatever. And then he goes on to talk about, you know, solo queue has been completely shit anyways for 2 straight seasons. And you're right. And again, other players weigh in. Forbiven says solo queue is just luck. Z. Okay, so now we're contradicting everything that we've ever known about solo queue. The only person who I think really said anything that was sensible about it was Forgiven, where he said if solo queue is not a good indicator of a current level of a player, then we shouldn't play. I'm all for that, man. Amen. So yeah, really weird situation, and like I say, it doesn't end there. So Balls made a blog post. Made a blog post about Balls, and he said, I wanted to throw out my thoughts on the situation about the whole criticism Jatt Balls ordeal. I mean, it's a fucking ordeal. Like, how is this an ordeal, by the way? Like, an ordeal? Like, really? Like, analyst analyzes performance based on statistical data, frames it in really nice way, polite as possible. Oh, the ordeal, it's all been... Come on, guys, like... You're the same fucking Riot pros that when I talk to you, you're always going on about how stupid the rules about toxicity are. Well, you got to grow a fucking pair then. You got to grow a fucking skin. And he goes, keep in mind, I think it's perfectly fine for people to have different opinions on things. Ideally speaking, we should keep the conversation with open minds to both sides. So he lists what Jatt says, and then he goes on to say, given the information he used as a means to criticise Balls, it's a poor amount of information and paints him in a bad light needlessly. Well, first of all, it's not a poor amount of information. It's the information that is there that we can glean from solo queue, and undoubtedly, based on the information, based on the statistical data that can't be argued with, Balls is one of the worst performers out of all the players who've gone over there to play in South Korean solo queue. That is an inarguable statement of fact. If you feel that paints him in a bad light, fine. It would be, again, it's ridiculous. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. It's not subjective. No one's saying Balls is shit. No one's saying Balls is worthless. No one's saying Balls is going to choke at Worlds. These are all subjective things. They are just Jatt just pointed out and everyone agrees with that he has performed the worst out of the players that are currently playing in South Korean solo queue. Let me just read on, because for me, I believe Jatt had intended to just bring up discussion revolving around Ball's play, but he went about it in a terrible way. Again, I don't see what's terrible about this. What can anybody actually explain why this is terrible beyond the community might use this as ammunition against Balls? I mean, that is the argument here. That's what we're really saying, right? That the Balls is under enough pressure as it is, and he might be under more pressure because the community, the people who don't like Balls, are going to use this. It's just, that is the only argument I've seen presented, and it just seems ridiculous, right? And then he ends it with this, and this is very alarming. Right. I'll just read the whole paragraph. This is ridiculous. I wanted to bring up a few other things as well, such as people saying we should stay off Twitter and not bitch about people criticizing us. I feel like this stance is basically telling us, fuck off, which is incredibly rude and ignorant. It's incredibly rude and ignorant to attack somebody on the basis that they're doing their job, and you don't like what they're saying as they're doing their job. That's rude and ignorant, by definition, actually. I think defending your name, your friend's name, from slander, misinformation is perfectly fine. Please, kids, a little bit of advice. Don't use slander, right? Don't use the word slander, because it definitely doesn't apply in this fucking case. And misinformation. There is nothing that is slanderous. There is no misinformation in the statement of fact about the solo queue performance of Balls. In a community where your image can be tarnished and bandwagoned for ages, it's actually important to not be labelled as trash, since it's very detrimental to your confidence in yourself as a player. Well, interestingly enough, when you're an analyst or a pundit, it's very important to your career to not have pros come out and publicly say your opinion's invalid. So you're a fucking hypocrite. I've seen this happen firsthand at plenty of players and analysts, where the public perception of a player ends up being their own perception of a player, even if it's false. People make memes, jokes out of it, which is to be expected. But when our jobs, careers are in danger because people keep spreading false information, again, none of it's false, none of it's false, what else do you expect the person to do? Well, again, you're talking about the community. You want to do something about the community? Criticize the community. You want to do something about people doing their fucking job, doing their job, and you want to like insulate yourself so you're protected from criticism, you're in the wrong fucking business. No one gets a pass, right? And everything that you're doing by lashing out at Jatt, you're making it harder for him to do his job. Do you think he's now maybe going to think twice about tweeting anything like that again? Of course he is. And it's ridiculous. It's just this fucking perpetual cycle of deflection. Do you know what real fucking pros do? They man up, they take the fucking flack, and they get on with it. That's what you do. That's what you have to do. You want to make Jatt eat his fucking words? Don't attack him on Twitter. Go fucking win worlds. Simple. It's that simple. All you're doing here is you're just creating an environment where, unless we're inside a hug box, unless everybody's saying nice things about each other, then nobody's allowed to deviate from that. You're creating an environment where you're complaining about the community saying bad things about you, while simultaneously trying to leverage the community against the person saying bad things about you. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it publicly. This whole thing is an absolute fucking nonsense. There's a bunch of other VODs that came out, like X Special put something out. Saint Vicious put something out trying to explain his thought process about it, right? And I think one of the points Saint Vicious made was like, oh well, Balls is trying to use new champions. Well, he still played Rumble the most. This is against statistics. So now you're saying things that are statistically inaccurate and misleading. Should perhaps High write a blog about you? You're not presenting information accurately. It's just gibberish that this even happened. So, I just... it frustrates me so much, because this is meant to be the esport that's the most advanced, the most developed out of all of the sports that we have, out of all of the esports titles. And yet, when it comes to such fundamentals as criticism and analysing the game, people aren't allowed to do it without a deluge of bullshit from pros who don't seem to have developed the requisite level of adulthood, the requisite level of interpersonal skills to be able to cope with the critique of their performance. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. See you on the next vid.